Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back to listen to a new story. Today I'm going to read a new story called The Improbable Silence of Moony Burgess. Here's part one. Behind the Quinn City Recreation Center, down a muddy hill and through a clearing bordered by a slow-moving creek and a line of young trees, Andrew Winton molested me in a tent we shared on a camping trip. That was a long time ago now, and it doesn't mean anything. There's no point describing the hazy details of waking to find his hand deep in my sleeping bag, groping above the waistband of my shorts, or the confused way I dealt with this situation, pulling his arm away once, twice, 3 times, baffled by what seemed to be a simple mistake, like he was trying to get into the wrong bedroll. This is old history, of course, and I wouldn't want to dredge any of this up for anyone, especially Andrew Winton, a fine, upstanding citizen and father, and member of the community. He stayed in Scouts well into his adult life, and perhaps remained involved still. That one night is but a minor scene in a long play. This afternoon I passed the rec center. 2 red brick stories, windows along the southwest wall, the activity rooms bursting with kids from community childcare. But I wasn't thinking of Andrew Winton, although he did cross my mind, of course, a fleeting thought. I'd been thinking about Polly, my daughter, and after I drove by, I thought of her still, though I did remember, briefly, the smell of the hot night and the path leading down the muddy hill and Andrew Winton's tent before Polly wrestled her way back into my thoughts. She'd come by the work site earlier in tight jeans and a low-cut black shirt that seemed, to me at least, a few sizes too small. I didn't mention her wardrobe. It was her business in her style, and it wasn't much different than the hip huggers or tube tops that women wore when I was younger. Still, I braced myself for the grief that would come from Randy and Phil and Dan Burgess's barrel-headed chimp of a son, Moony, who'd been working on my crew because Dan owns the company, and he pulled me aside a few months earlier and asked could I please give his son a spot on my crew, please keep him busy and out of trouble. That bunch acted like they didn't have anything better to do than gawk at Polly or any other woman, even some dumpy housewife in sweatpants, and hoot and act like they were jerking off or getting blowjobs or any number of other raunchy things. Even after I shouted at them to shut the fuck up and get back to fucking work, I heard them laughing as I walked across the lot to where she leaned against the tailgate with the sun coming down on her shoulders like she owned all the light. I'd probably do the same thing to them if it wasn't Polly, but one of their daughters or wives, and besides, Polly can take care of herself. None of that crew would say anything to her face, especially not since she'd been dating Lewis, the MMA fighter with the flat nose and fists the size of hubcaps. And because none of them, except maybe Moony, would believe they'd ever have a chance with a woman like Polly because despite the fact she was brought up poor, she carries herself with class. More class than all those bums in their stained shirts put together, me included. Which is not to say that they're mean or bad, just normal and too tired to change. Polly waved to the crew on the roof and blew them a kiss. That settled them down. Sorry about that bunch of animals, I said. They just need attention, she said. They aren't so bad. She wanted to stop by my new place later with a housewarming gift. She shifted her weight from foot to foot. You can come by whenever you want, I said. The door's always open. We chatted about nothing for a few moments, and after she drove off, I got into my truck and went to Dunkin' Donuts, buying time until her glare faded and I could get back to being me. Another thing I don't think too much about is the red Ford that my mother drove when she dropped me off at the rec center. It had been my grandfather's car. Cherry red, big block 351, doors long and heavy, a foot of space between the grill and the radiator, a trunk fit for a gangster. My mother would just tap the gas, and it would surge forward, dying to run, sick of her always with her brakes, tapping and slowing, tapping and slowing. At the rec center, I took my blue pack from the back seat and waved goodbye. I was 15, too old to kiss my mother. She'd aged 10 years the first time I'd asked her not to kiss me in public, but by now she'd grown used to it. Like we all do. Then it was down the hill and through the clearing and past the leader's circle and into the field near the border with the city property where Andrew Winton was already pitching his tent. He was tall and commanding and wore military-style glasses and had been in Scouts since he was 8. He was a walking Scout handbook: knots, outdoor skills, morally upright behavior, patient mentor. It was he who organized the camping trip as a service weekend. We were to clear a section of the property to make way for a series of summer cabins that the rec center would use for the community's benefit. That's all I remember, all that I can recall of Andrew Winton's tent, which he bought with his own money and which was larger and nicer than the troops' tents, green and blue, with its own nylon fly that kept sleepers bone dry, even in heavy rains. He'd laid down ground cover and unrolled the tent. I'd known him for years, and I set right into helping without being asked. I'd set up dozens of tents and Andrew probably hundreds, so we finished quickly, well before anyone else. We started a fire and put water to boil, and by the time the other Scouts came to our site, we were already cooking stew in a big black pot on the coals and cobbler in a Dutch oven. The other tents ringed the clearing, each set back against the trees, hidden by tall grasses and wildflowers. As the sun went down, fireflies blinked in the empty spaces. Everything was unblemished, and I couldn't have known what would come to pass. The cobbler cooled slowly, and we ate it from the cast-iron pot with wooden spoons too big for our mouths, and washed it down with water that I retrieved from a spigot at the end of the property. Basketballs thumped against the gym floor and echoed through the trees. Our site glowed in firelight at the edge of it all. Andrew Winton sat on his portable camp seat, shuffling a deck of cards. I went to the tent and unrolled my bedroll and set out my clothes and retrieved my toothbrush. Outside the tent, just near the trees, was an outcropping of ledge, a stone raft, flat and wide. I climbed there and laid back and stared into the sky. The clouds parted to reveal a bright moon. The temperature dropped, and the grasses dampened with dew. We played cards for a time, and then Mr. Jennings told us to hit the sack. I went in first and read by the light of my flashlight until my eyes grew heavy. I turned off the light, and the inside of the tent glowed with a pale, moonlit radiance. The nylon walls rippled in the breeze. Insects popped against the surface. Later, Andrew Winton came into the tent, but I was sleeping, and I don't remember that at all. Thank you. Part 2 tomorrow.